Welcome to the cabin. Today we're doing part 2 of the Be'lakor series. If you haven't watched part 1, click right here. That being said, let's get right to it. So today we're focusing on assembling the miniature. This whole process took me about 9.5 hours in total, so it was quite a lot of work to get this one finished. I actually filmed the entire process, but I decided to speed the footage up about 60 times, so that 1 second in this video is actually 1 minute in reality. Otherwise, the video would have been like almost 10 hours long. I followed the guide, the instructions that it came with, and therefore I started with the base, followed by the body, and finally the wings. However, I read that the instructions that are printed in the booklet actually had some errors. I think there were some parts that were mislabeled, so I had to download the guide from Games Workshop and followed the digital one instead. So if you're doing Be'lakor now at the time of this video's release, you might want to do the same thing so you don't end up making any mistakes or having to spend even more time than you have to. As you can see, I'm using a pair of clippers to cut the parts from the sprue, and a hobby knife and some hobby files to remove the excess plastic from where the parts were stuck to the sprue, as well as removing all the mold lines. The main time sink of this project was removing all the mold lines. Like I said in the first video, it has almost 90 parts, so there's a lot of different pieces that you have to clean mold lines from. You could probably do it a lot faster by cutting some corners here or not caring about the mold lines. I think you could easily like cut it in half if you are not as meticulous as I am right here. I decided to assemble both of the corpses for the base. These ones go right on the base. You don't really need to pin them or anything because they're form-fitted to all the rocks. So once I have them all assembled, I could just decide if I want to put the Space Marine on or the Chaos Warrior on, or just leave the base as it is. So here we have the corpses. I put them on my homemade painting handles, pinned them down, as well as the little extra bits there. And I also decided to keep the chains and the little chaos star separate. I just used some blue tack to put them on a temporary holder, which I will use later when I spray them. The last part of finishing up the base is adding some PVA glue and some sand around the rocky outcrops to finish up the texture of the base. Now it's time to move ahead and start working on the body. When I unboxed the miniature, I had some ideas of maybe magnetizing it to have the different arm and face options. But as I was building it, I realized that this was quite difficult. You would have to change the chest as well as the arm, and I wanted to fill those gaps in the chest. So if I kept that part separate with a magnet, there would still be that gap visible, and I didn't want that. Same thing with the face. So I decided to just settle on one specific face and one specific arm. The body had a few gaps on it, nothing too bad, and I usually use milliput or green stuff to fill those gaps, but this time I decided to do plastic putty from Vallejo. I did this to save some time, and because the gaps weren't that severe to begin with, I felt that this was enough. So I just applied some of the plastic putty and used a silicone brush with a flat edge to just pretty much scrape away any excess and make sure that the plastic putty went down into the gap and not all over the place. You could also fill the gaps with just some extra glue, and then once the glue has fully set, you can scrape them off with your modeling knife or file them down. That works with miniatures like the Imperial Knight, for example, when you put two gun barrels together and they form this perfect circle. It's a little bit harder on this one because this is an organic model. It's harder to get into those kind of shapes with your knife or your file. So I feel like the putty was a pretty good and quick way of handling this. I had a lot of time to think during this almost 10-hour process, and I was thinking about the prices of our hobby compared to some other hobbies. Now, you can't really say that Be'lakor is a cheap model. It cost about £89, or your local equivalent. For me, it was about 1,000 crowns in the Swedish currency. But I was trying to compare this to other hobbies or interests that are a little bit more mainstream. For example, video games. Prices of video games have gone up quite a lot, and especially if you're buying the deluxe editions or all the DLC that comes with it, or season pass or loot boxes or whatever. But if you compare Be'lakor to a video game, he's pretty much a little bit more expensive than your standard video game. But so far, 9.5 hours have been spent doing this hobby with him, and that's just the first part. The first enjoyment that you get out of it. After building him, there's all the time you spend painting him, and once you've got him painted, there's of course all the time you could spend playing games with him. Be'lakor is also compatible for both Warhammer 40,000 and Warhammer Age of Sigmar, so you could play him in two of the main game systems right here. So this hobby lets you enjoy the background, the assembly, the painting, the gaming. There's a lot of creative aspects and a lot of fun you can have spending time with this model. For me personally, I feel that the time and the money that you spend for this hobby is worth it. You get to be creative, you get to feel very satisfied at the end for having put all this effort into it, and then you get rewarded by getting to play these games, getting to show off your model, getting to interact with other people who have also put time and effort and money into their respective models. That's my personal opinion, of course. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with video games. I play them myself. But I feel like the creativity that you could put into this and the kind of patience that you have to develop is really worth it. Because with video games, you get that instant gratification of just booting up the game and playing it and getting rewarded in the game directly. Here, though, you have to use your patience. You have to think of the goal that comes ahead. I have to spend all these hours assembling, all these hours painting, and then learning the rules, and then I get to play with him or I get to show him off to my friends. So I think it's a healthy hobby in that regard. I decided to do the Age of Sigmar chains on the wings and the skull pile on the base as well. I feel like these are quite neutral. The only thing that signifies Age of Sigmar are the King's crowns. But I feel they are less obvious than a Space Marine helmet or a servo skull. So I feel like adding these chains makes it more neutral, so I could use it in both game settings. To make the painting easier, I decided to also keep the miniature in some sub-assemblies. So I have the base separate, the body separate, both of the wings separate, and then, like I showed earlier, I have the corpses as well as all of the chains in their own assemblies. I did this so I could undercoat them in different colors, as well as having an easier time to reach all the different parts of the model once I start painting it. So that's it, about 9.5 hours of work sped up for this video. I'm not quick at this by any means, and I think that other people could probably do this a lot faster, but I did enjoy the time I put into it, and I think all that effort will be rewarded once I start painting it. So you can't see any of the mold lines, and hopefully the gaps will be hidden away once the paint is on there. Thank you so much for watching. Next time we'll start painting this beast. Please consider subscribing if you want to watch that one. I'll see you next time. Good luck with your miniatures.